Hey, I'm Brent from Daydocs Films, from the movie Free Burma Rangers, if you've heard of that. And I want to help you, if you're in ministry, tell stories of how God's at work, whether you have enough time or not, whether you have enough resources or not, and whether you have enough volunteers or not. I think we can help with all three. So I'm going to tell you what we do at Daydocs to tell our stories. So that you can see it and you can take that process if you want. And then we're starting a training to teach people how we do it if you want to know how we do that. So I'll walk you through really quick here the what. Here's what we do to tell our stories. And we combine kind of a Hollywood approach, like what reality TV or big documentaries or shows might do. We combine that approach with a faith approach that might be more like planning a sermon or a talk. And we've developed a way to combine the two. And it seems to consistently provide powerful results. So you may have seen our work in Free Burma Rangers, the movie, or we've done a bunch of short films that pastors used in their sermons for many years, stories from all over the world. And then and this year, we launched a project which was actually kind of an experiment. It was a fun project, but it was an experiment because I wanted to see if it was possible to train someone with no film experience, no audio experience, no podcasting experience to tell stories like we tell those stories at Daydocs. And we did it. So because we're a media missions organization, we didn't have a lot of resources. So I ended up training my wife as the experiment. No offense, Danielle. She was an English teacher previously. My goal was to empower her in our process so that she could then take it and do great things with it. And she ended up producing this miraculous audio documentary series, which is unbelievable. If you've listened to it, if you haven't, I encourage you to listen to it. I mean, she had a lot of ministry experience in the past, but had never done any media, had never done any audio, podcasting, film, video, none of it. So over 2 weeks, I was able to take her from not doing it to going through our processes and realizing, wow, it's way simpler than she thought when you do it like this. And these stories are powerful if you've heard it. And it's, again, because of some of these processes. So we've tested it and it worked. And so now the team around me has encouraged me. Let's make this available. Let's share this with other ministries, because our goal at Daydocs is that 1 billion people would hear a story of how God is at work, that they would be able to encounter him through a powerful story. We're not going to tell all those stories. So we want to help train and equip you and your ministry and the people in your ministry that, whether they're on staff or they're sitting in the pew or they're getting an email and they don't know how to get involved yet, we think that there's something special here. Okay, so here's our process. First, you have to pick the right person from a story. And there's a few things that we look for. I think oftentimes ministries lean towards people with big stories, but in our experience, it's actually you want to lean towards the people who God is working in their heart, and that if you spent time with them, you could learn from them. So that's typically our starting point, is who's the right person, not the right big story, the right person. Interview. We have a process for our interview that, really you should have a template as you're doing an interview. Like, look, here's the basic questions that we ask every time. And then it doesn't take much thought to get into it. You might tweak a couple questions, maybe. But really then it gives you a foundation that you can just get into the interview. Next, and here is the thing where most ministries, I think, and most people that are trying to tell stories might get stuck. It's like this next stage is actually the most critical thing for you getting those stories off of the shelf and out quickly and easily. So after we do the interview, this probably will be surprising to you. I actually don't ever listen to the interview again. Never. It takes so much time to listen to it and then listen to it, and then listen to it, and try to pull the best pieces out. It takes so much time. And by the time you get to the good part of the editing process, you just end up getting exhausted, and it sits. And so here's the way that we speed through that process and make it fun. We get every word transcribed. We upload the interview somewhere to get it transcribed. So it's in like a Google Doc. And then we go through, and then you're able to take this document and cut it down into a short script by reading, by highlighting, by doing things that actually are more like sermon prep, I suppose, or like what a screenwriter would do. It kind of combines these elements. And so there's a process you can go through to do that, but you could come up with your own process. But the key is that you can read it so you don't have to watch the interview again, because if you watch the interview, you're going to get tired. And think about it this way. If you're trying to tell the story right, you need something from the beginning of the interview and the end of the interview, and they need to go together, to piece them together. Like to make a simple idea communicated well. That's a complex edit if you're in an editing system watching the interview, because you have to watch the whole interview to try to find that one thing. If you're in a document, it's not a complex process. It's a very simple process. So then after we have our script from the interview that's now cut down into what we think could work in the video, I'm able to share this with an editor. I found him online. He's in Africa. He's $12 an hour, making a great wage for the city and country that he lives in, actually. He's thrilled with the work. He's super capable. And so what I can do is I can give him this script, this document that now I have, give him the footage, and he can cut it all together. And so honestly, like there's points where we will at the end of a workday, send a script, the next morning, wake up, edit, done. And so you can imagine, like you can go from having that interview, whether it's video or audio, having that interview content to edited first draft very quickly, just with having to like read and process on a document. It's amazing. And then if you're doing video, it's often at this point after the first interview that I will make a shot list for B-roll. And that's what I would suggest for ministries. Not beforehand, because then what you end up doing is getting a lot of slow motion shots of people looking off into the sunset or whatever. But surely it can't be that simple. Well, it's not. That simplifies the process of getting it done. But actually, we have a lot that we work through to get that script where it needs to get. And some of the quick ones are setups and payoffs. And here's a high-level overview. Scenes. You want to be thinking in terms of scenes throughout the story. That's how all media you're watching on TV is working. That's how movies are working. Scenes. So you want to think in terms of scenes. And then you want to think in terms of setups and payoffs. So a lot of people would teach story in a 3-act structure, but to be honest, it doesn't fully make sense. 3-act structure to me feels like too out of reach. I don't like thinking of story in terms of 3-act structure. I think of story in terms of setups and payoffs. And it's a process of setups and payoffs until you get to the end climax of the story, which is the main payoff. So everything actually has been a setup to that one payoff. So there's a process we work through to get to this as well. But I would encourage you, if you're watching this and you're not going to go through our training, just think of like, what is the main thing I want the audience to get out of this? And then what do I need to do to set that up? And that's going to help you start to filter through all the things that maybe are cool, but don't actually help you get to this main thing. And maybe there's a few main things. There's some ways to do that. But you have a big payoff that you're trying to get to. How do you set it up? And then once you have your audio edit done, really you can start getting into B-roll. You can start getting into, if it's an audio podcast, getting into like sound effects and the different things that are going to build it out, getting into music. And so we have processes, we do this, but I would encourage you, you got to do this audio story first. You got to do the audio portion first. And then from that, you can build out more. So I'm right now working actually on a pilot for a docu-series. It's kind of a spiritual sequel to Free Burma Rangers. And the only way we can get through the mountains and mountains of footage to things that are meaningful is actually we do the audio story first. And so we do it on paper, like what I just kind of walked you through. And then that paper I give to the editor. The editor starts piecing it together, and then we watch what's on the timeline after that script has been put on the timeline. And at that point, you're able to realize what is and isn't working well, shift things. You can shift on paper and give it to the editor, or you can just do it with notes, however you want to do it. There's several ways, but the key is that you've now watched fresh a cut that's like way further down the road. And because your first exposure to the story, like in actual form, is way further down the road, you're not tired. You're actually excited to see it. And it's easier for you to make quick decisions about what can happen to finish this thing and finish it really well. Then you might be thinking, well, we're doing video, so we have color correction, or we have sound, or maybe it's just audio podcasts, and you still have sound mixing and cleanup and all these things to do. You can have your team or someone on your staff do it. That's great if you have that ability. What we do, because I can't hire a sound person that's a pro to be full-time. We're a missions organization. We can't do that. But I can hire online someone that can spend 2 to 5 hours that's a professional, and their 2 to 5 hours is able to get the audio working really well, really well. And so they get it to a place where it sounds like a movie because that's their job. And I actually only had to pay them for 5 hours, like way beyond level-wise what I would be able to do if I was sitting down and doing it. And it made it super easy because I had the templates to post online and the places to post online. So I knew here's how I can have my menu of people I want to choose from, and then talk to them and find the right collaborators. And then once I have the collaborators, I now can just go back to them over and over and over every time I have a story, and it can get done fast. And so I get to be creative at the times that I want to be creative. And then I just get to coordinate and let other people be creative to help it get like to the highest level we can at a super low budget, because you're paying people around the world to do very specific things to help it get through the process. And they're going to get it done way better than I would if I was sitting down to do it. And I've been doing this for 20 years. Okay. And then the final element that I would say is critical for doing ministry faith films is prayer, and is a spirit-led process, which I think is key throughout this. Yeah, in our experience, it's you want God to surprise you. And you want to do all of these faithful things in the process and be prayerful throughout, so that if and when the Lord wants to make something clear about here are the pieces that are going to fit that you didn't even know were going to fit, that you can see those way easier. And so we try to position ourselves in our filmmaking, in our audio documentaries. We try to position ourselves so that God can surprise us and we can follow when it feels like he's prompting, and we can be faithful in the rest of the process in the fastest and simplest way possible. So why are we making this available? Well, one, for ministries that it will bless, it would also bless us because it will support more of our media missions work. Two, our prayer is that 1 billion people would experience God stories around the world. 1 billion people would be able to see or hear a piece of media content about how God is at work. That's not all going to come through us. In fact, it's way better if it comes through the local ministries that God is using, so that you can faithfully tell stories in your community of what God's done, and they don't hide, but that you're able to efficiently get them out to your community so that God can use them. Because once you start putting media out, you see the Holy Spirit start grabbing people and using it very specifically. And I mean, it's awesome. And so we want to help you be able to do that. And two, I know how many balls you probably have juggling. I have a lot of balls I'm juggling. I can't sit down and do all the stories, and I think you probably can't either, whether you're a pastor, whether you're in charge of a media team, whether you're at a nonprofit ministry, whether you're an individual that's just trying to pursue the thing that God has called you to that includes stories. You probably don't have enough time to sit down and be deliberate and do every single step yourself. And so if we can help you figure out how to make that process as simple and fun and cost-effective as possible, and then be able to bring in other people, we want to help you do that. And third, if this training and our templates and processes, if this can help you bring people up that have not much experience or no experience, whether they're on staff or they're volunteers, bring them up to be able to tell powerful stories in a simple way, because a lot of times it's actually simpler than what you've been told or what you think it would be if you do certain processes. If you don't do the processes, It could take a really long time, and you could just get bogged down and completely weighed down by it. So if you have powerful stories of how God is at work that you wish you could tell for your community, but also for the community around you, that God might be able to use them. And if you're short on time, if you're short on resources, if you're short on people even that are trained to be able to do it at the highest levels, I believe our training will help you. All right, so there you have our Daydocs process for telling our stories, whether it's short, like a video or audio podcast, or it's a feature documentary. The process is really the same, even like an experience that is going to include story. Process is the same. It has the same basic foundation. So I hope that that was an encouragement. If you want to learn how we do this, I'm thinking of how my team would tell me to tell you this. I mean, if you want to learn how to do this, like, we have a training that you can see details of it below. And if you sign up, there's a bunch of sessions led by, I lead content in them, but then also by a teacher, by my wife, Danielle, who learned our process. And because she was a teacher, she's actually uniquely positioned to be able to walk a class, to walk people through the training. So each of these sessions that you see below, it includes our processes, our templates, and our tools that we use, so that you can take them, replicate them, skip way ahead in the process, basically. And you also could bring people up with no experience to be able to do the same, if that would be helpful to you. And then as a part of the process, there's group coaching sessions. There's opportunities to submit homework and have, homework if you want to do it, and have feedback given. And in all of this, man, we pray and are aiming for it to be a blessing, that it would take pressure off of you with all the balls that you're juggling, that it would help you be able to get more of a grasp and control on not only how to wrangle these stories getting done, but make them as powerful as they can be, by simplifying it into our process as much as you can. I'm sure there's other ways out there to do it, but we've done this like dozens and dozens of times, from short films to feature documentaries. And so I believe and I'm confident in saying, like, we'll show you the process, and I think it will be a blessing to your ministry. And ultimately, then what that means is it will be a blessing to the community around you and those that God is using you to serve and to introduce Him to them. So I pray that you have wisdom as you process whether you should do this or not. And man, if you feel like it would be good, come on, let's do it. We would love to show you how we do our stories, how we do them, so that you can tell your stories. God bless you.